Hello. Hello, everyone.
Can you make it a little
Can you hear me?
louder?
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Hannah Wong, a second-year PhD student working in industrial ecology and a member of BIOMES committee. And I will be introducing our speakers shortly. BIOMES stands for Bridging Issues and Optimizing Methods in Environmental Studies. It is YSE's flagship seminar series featuring community-sourced interdisciplinary presentations on research, policy, and activism surrounding pressing environmental issues. Our goal is to inspire and inform conversation within the YSE community, so you all are welcome to suggest speakers and topics through biomes.yse@yale.edu. And there will be a trivia today on Elena at Orange's website today, so everyone is welcome to go on to the website and you might get a coupon for that. So definitely
At the end of the presentation.
yeah, we will be doing that at the end of the presentation. And it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, who has been doing a lot of exciting works and bring our community together. Dr. Elena Grewal is a data scientist, small business woman, nationally cited education expert, and multiracial progressive leader. Previously, as head of data science at Airbnb, Elena helped lead efforts to close a gender pay gap and discrimination against Black customers and lead a team of over 200 data scientists responsible for driving significant business growth. As the founder of Data to the People, Dr. Grewal focuses on data for good projects in the space of politics, the environment, gender equity, and criminal justice. Most recently, she has opened a soft serve ice cream shop in New Haven with a major principle of the shop being sustainability. And if you haven't been there, I highly recommend it. It's been a hot spot at East Rock. She received a Bachelor of Arts in Ethics, Politics, and Economics at Yale University and a PhD in the Economics of Education at Stanford University. And she currently serves as a lecturer at YSE, teaching a class, Real-World Environmental Data Science, focused on practical techniques for doing data science in Python. Let's welcome Dr. Grewal.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much, Hannah. It's so great to be here with you all. I feel like this is an appropriate topic for a lunch talk. You all are going to want dessert after this. So as Hannah mentioned, I'm Elena Grewal, and I'm here to talk to you about a somewhat unique topic. When I thought about kind of what could I share with this group, knowing it's interdisciplinary, knowing we're interested in the environment, and also knowing that, there's this interesting question of, small businesses and ice cream. This is where I decided to focus, but I will talk a little bit about Airbnb days as well. So the kind of thesis for the talk is that data can help business sustainability. And we think about sustainability here on multiple levels. There's environmental sustainability. There's the business being able to last and be sustainable. So I'll talk about kind of those different dimensions and how we balance some of those trade-offs and questions. I wanted to start with just some high-level motivational framing stats. Many of you have probably heard some of these stats before, that greenhouse gas emissions from the food system accounts for maybe 20 to 30% of the greenhouse gas emissions. And that's not counting necessarily all of the other environmental impacts around water use, pesticides and pollutants, et cetera. You also may have heard stats around food waste as well. And there's certainly ranges of estimates out there, but whatever estimate you look at, it seems that there is a pretty high percentage of food that does go wasted in the United States. One thing that you may not have heard of as much is how much people in the US eat out. So this chart is showing the amount that US spends on food at home versus food away from home. And this chart basically shows that these spends are actually pretty equal. So about 50% of food spending is at food away from home. And not all of that is at restaurants per se, but a vast majority of it is. So that's some motivation of why we might be interested in thinking about the sustainability of a food business like an ice cream store. And of course, restaurants take other resources. So we can look at electricity, gas, water, cleaning supplies, packaging, building materials. There are so many different factors of sustainability here that we can look at, and studying sustainability in restaurants matters. And we have a case study right here. that I can speak to because of a lot of firsthand experience called Elena's on Orange, as Hannah mentioned, a soft serve ice cream shop that I opened this past fall in New Haven. I wanted to start also a little bit about me. I'm actually from New Haven. I grew up here. I did go to Yale for undergrad, notably did not study anything related to data science. So a word out there for all of you who are interested in a career change. It's certainly possible. You don't have to have gotten an undergrad degree to go into data science. I then went to do a PhD at Stanford, and that's where I learned most of my data skills. And I'm very interested in how to solve problems and using data as a lens to do that. Most recently, I've been doing work at Data to the People, a data science consultancy, as Hannah mentioned. This was motivated by the 2020 election, wanting to do something to help there, and then expanded after that. And I also am so excited to be teaching here at YSE. So for those of you who haven't taken our class, it's an excellent class about data science in the real world, and hopefully you'll get some hints of what it's like here in this lecture today. We teach the programming language Python. I think last week there was a presentation by an economist who talked about Excel, and I talk a lot about how I think Python is the best tool out there. So definitely encourage you to check it out. Most importantly, where it all began is at Bill's Carousel Ice Cream Store in New Haven, Connecticut. This is on Whaley Avenue. If you live in Westville, you've probably seen it. Apparently, when I was little, this is something that I took home from school to my parents, that my favorite thing to use my hands for is to eat my ice cream. So started off very young, interested in ice cream. Fast forward to PhD in education, I was studying social networks and big data. So I was really interested in social networks because I had an experience of kind of going from a New Haven public school to a private school and kind of seeing how much segregation there was in our school system, and interested in kind of how that played out in schools. So I started building maps of social networks in schools, looking at friendship data and showing how much racial segregation there were in friendship networks, and how that related to economic segregation, and how that related to kind of later life outcomes. And to do a lot of this modeling, I had to learn how to code, and I had to learn a lot of data science techniques. So that was kind of how I started to get into data science. Most of the research that I did during grad school was conducted at Fresh Yogurt in Palo Alto. So again, lots of ice cream experience. And as I finished my PhD, I started hearing about this thing called data science. And this chart shows Google Trends data on searches for data science over time. And you can kind of see how data science searches has really increased over time, and with somewhat of an inflection point around 2012 when I was finishing my degree. So that was in the air. And as a result, I ended up getting connected to a little company called Airbnb, and was basically their first data scientist. And it was a big shift of a career change. But as I found out, all of my skills that I had learned in grad school did apply, which was very cool, and will apply for ice cream too. So I want to talk a little bit about data for sustainability in the Airbnb context, which is mostly about sustainability in the economic sense at Airbnb. There were three types of ways that data science helped economic sustainability at Airbnb. And I want to talk about this because I think sometimes people hear the word data science, they don't necessarily know exactly what that means. And that's in part because it actually can mean different things. So the first kind of bucket of work was analytics. So this is around defining and monitoring metrics, creating data narratives, building tools. And essentially for this, we're taking our data skills and our programming skills to be able to work with this scale of data to understand what's happening on the Airbnb website, and to track how we're doing, and to also understand how we can improve as a result of that analytics. The second bucket is around algorithms. And so this is where we're looking at how do we use data to automate decision-making in the form of an algorithm and power data products. So examples of this include things like if you go on Airbnb and you search for a home in Barcelona, there's a list of places that show up. There's an algorithm that's looking at data on different properties and deciding what to show you at the top of the list. Finally, a key contribution of data science is this field of inference. And this is really around establishing causal relationships with statistics. And so the idea here is that, we want to know if what we're doing is working, what is the impact of what we're doing, and we can use data to help to figure that out. So I want to go through a few examples. So one thing that analytics can do is help us to understand and track progress. We can look at data to find important insights. One of the troubling insights that we found in our data was that Black guests were not able to be accepted for a booking at the same rate as white guests. And this was something that we didn't want to see in our platform, and we wanted to make a change. So we set some goals and operational metrics. So reduce that gap in acceptance rate. In terms of operational metrics, then we thought about, okay, well, what other metrics can we track? So one thing is that Airbnb's had changes in its booking process over the years. At one point, there were many more cases where you'd have to message the host, get approved, and then book. But we knew that that was a friction-filled process and also probably was leading to some of this discrimination. And so we really made a big shift to switch to instant book, where you would just go ahead and book the place. At the same time, we wanted to make sure that any guest who was booking on our platform was not going to be discriminated against at all. And so we had a metric around hosts signing a pledge to be inclusive, for example. And then we were able to track that over time with a dashboard, seeing our progress. And we did see major gains in the use of instant book, and that did help with this gap. For algorithms, some of the kind of cool stuff we were doing was looking at images and trying to understand what was in them. So this is an example where we have a photo of a bathroom, and for a variety of reasons, we might want to know what's in the bathroom so we can know what exactly is on our website. This can be generalized to all of the photos on our website. And so we were able to build a customized Airbnb model to be able to identify what items were in each of our homes on the platform. And so you can see here that using a generic third-party model, we were able to identify a toilet and a bathroom cabinet. But with our improved machine learning algorithm, we were able to identify the shower, towels, a sink, much more, and be more comprehensive. So finally, now causal inference. And this was the one that I actually started with. So the context here is Airbnb had a program where we had an entire team of hundreds of people calling hosts and helping them to improve their Airbnb listing. And the thought was that this was an effective way to help improve the quality of the homes on the website. And the initial data that the finance team had put together said, if we look at the number of bookings before and after the phone calls, it looks like the bookings go up. And so we are concluding that the phone calls are effective. However, the issue is that that is not rigorous causal inference. If we're looking before and after, there's lots of other things that might be changing between that phone call and after the phone call. So we decided to run a randomized control trial / experiment / A/B test, different words for the same thing. And essentially what we did is we said, let's take 10% of hosts randomly, set them aside, and they cannot be called. And then let's compare after 6 months, how did the hosts that didn't get any call compared to the hosts that could have been called? And what we found was that there was basically no difference. So that was a really interesting finding, totally at odds with what had been found before. And what we determined was the reason for this is that a lot of times the hosts that were getting calls and were picking up the phones, they were the better hosts to begin with. They were already engaged. They were already going to be better. They were already going to make changes and improvements to their listings no matter what. In addition, a lot of phone calls were coming in the early life cycle of a host. And so, just naturally over time, hosts were improving, they were getting more bookings. And so basically we weren't seeing any impact from these calls. So this is an example where, running a rigorous experiment as opposed to the before and after made a pretty big difference in terms of the conclusion we were going to draw. And it led us to then discontinue that program and dedicate our resources to something that was going to be improving the experience for hosts and guests. And after we ran that first experiment, we then designed a platform to be able to run experiments across the site, and we ran thousands of experiments. A great team makes it all possible. One of the things that I think is really exciting about the field of data science is how interdisciplinary it is. We had data scientists from all different backgrounds, and I think that really made for a rich data ecosystem. We also had a very diverse team. So a big focus for us at Airbnb was diversity. We were able to increase the percent of women on the team from 15% to 45%. And a lot of that was through changes to the interview process and a focus on data. So looking at data on the gender distribution at different stages and understanding how could we improve, doing things like increasing the top of funnel applicants who are women by writing blog posts and hosting events. We had a take-home data challenge. We made that anonymous in terms of the grading instead of having people's names on it. That helped. And we improved the diversity of the interview panel. So using data for our own internal team's growth. All the time that this was happening, I was going to Twirl and Dip soft serve in Golden Gate Park, bringing it back to ice cream. And this soft serve is like so good. It was so tasty. The dip was amazing. Every time I went to the park, I was like, this is such a highlight. It's so wonderful to have this ice cream. So Airbnb's valuation did increase by a lot. I think when I started, it was at 1.5 billion and increased to over 75 billion. And one thing to note is that this data work that we did was really about economic sustainability and perhaps social sustainability, not much about environmental sustainability. And, that's something that I think has been changing more recently for the company, but it's worth noting that that was kind of not really a big focus at the time. Okay, so let's move on to the main event, which is ice cream. Some of you may be wondering, how did this come to be to start an ice cream store, going from data science to ice cream? Well, it was the pandemic. We all were walking around more, and I lived in East Rock, and there was no ice cream, so it was very sad. However, in April of 2021, an empty storefront appeared on the corner of Orange and Canner. Was this the perfect location for ice cream? There was no nearby ice cream store or even dessert shop, and it was walking distance to the park. So it reminded me of those days in Golden Gate Park, getting that ice cream cone at Twirl and Dip. And there was a lot of foot traffic. I sat outside and I counted the number of people that walked by. Classic technique for data collection in the restaurant business. I also liked that it was a sustainable location in the sense that there were so many people walking. And so it would be something where, a lot of people wouldn't necessarily need to drive there. They could just walk. It was in the middle of this kind of thriving neighborhood with lots of students and families and schools. And so that was kind of a really appealing aspect of this location. And I also realized that there wasn't any soft serve in New Haven at all. So there was also that aspect. And I knew the business had to be something that was sustainable. That was really important. I'm teaching at YSE. This is critical for the world in general. In terms of thinking about environmental sustainability for a restaurant, there are a number of different factors that can come into play. There's energy usage, water usage, waste, disposables that we'd be using, the chemicals that we might use to clean the building, and then the food itself. And this is from the Green Restaurant Association little infographic. So I'll talk about these different aspects and how we kind of use data points of different types to inform our decisions. And I also wanted to share this kind of Venn diagram of sustainability. So when I think about sustainability and how do we make it happen, there's sort of the environmental sustainability intersected with what's feasible to do, intersected with what people want when it comes to making a business. So how this location and the data collection began. For those of you who lived in the East Rock area, you might have actually seen this. We put up on the door an ice cream survey. So just a QR code you could scan. It would link to a Google form, and you could fill out information about your interest in ice cream, other items. And we had over 800 people fill out a form, which is kind of amazing for people just walking by. And this was literally what the sign looked like. Someone apparently took a bite out of it. I don't know what happened. There were a couple major insights that informed the business initially. So one was that warm beverages, coffee, hot cocoa, and tea were the top requested items in addition to ice cream. And 25% of respondents said that dairy-free was important for there to be an option that was dairy-free. And this was the most kind of prominent food desire. So dairy-free soft serve is really interesting. Obviously, we hear a lot about the environmental impact of cows and methane emissions and lots of kind of negative impacts of that. So we thought about, okay, if we're doing dairy-free, what do we choose? How do we choose like a good environmental option? And there were a number of different options that we considered. So one was oats, one was nuts of different types as a base, pea protein as a base. There's actually a company called Ripple, which sells a soft serve base that's based on pea protein, and then soy. And as we kind of looked at these different options, we also did some testing because we also wanted it to be delicious. And a part of that testing was actually reaching out to the woman who had started Twirl and Dip, who agreed to come on board to make our ice cream, which was very exciting. So at the end of the day, we decided to go with oat milk for a number of reasons. We did not do a full life cycle assessment. If someone would like to do that, that would be great. There were some other kind of high-level data points that informed this. First, oats are cheap. They're easy to get. It's easy to find. We're like, okay, we're not going to have an issue with sourcing oats at any time. And we actually decided to make our oat milk from scratch. So again, all we would need were the oats themselves. Based on the research, it looked like oats were also a pretty environmentally friendly option in general, maybe depending on the source of the oats, but in general it was. Also, oat milk is something that people are familiar with. They have it in their coffee. It's offered at Starbucks. It's not going to be a kind of strange option that people might be scared of for some reason. And most importantly, it was delicious. So that's a picture of Meg making our first oat milk soft serve, and the first one that came out. We were amazed. It tasted amazing right off the bat. And in particular, chocolate tasted amazing. I would not say every flavor tasted amazing in oat milk. So as a result, we actually decided to just have chocolate be oat milk. And for the vanilla, we would stick with dairy. And the thought here was that, we want to be making progress, but we also want to be a sustainable business. And if we make chocolate oat milk the only chocolate option, everyone will be having an oat milk option if they do a swirl and if they want chocolate. And then we have the vanilla, which is again going to be dairy, and that's something that's more familiar. And so we kind of decided that would be a good middle ground step. And frankly, we just didn't have a great vanilla option. So we're like, okay, let's keep working on this. Maybe we'll get a vanilla option that's great, but right now we're going to stick with dairy vanilla. We, of course, use data to decide on our vanilla dairy. We actually had a blind taste test. So again, a randomized controlled experiment of some smaller kind, where we had people come and taste the different dairy options and then vote on a secret ballot about which they liked the best. And unfortunately, there were only a few suppliers that were really feasible for us to source reliably. So we didn't have a huge number of options for people to choose from, but the blind taste test was really helpful and the results were really clear. And thankfully, the result was actually that we went with the option that had the least preservatives, was probably the most environmentally friendly. We were going to go with it probably anyways, but we wanted to see, how did people like them? And so that was great to see, although there were definitely some people who loved the one that was definitely the most artificial. And so, there are definitely different tastes out there. Okay, so how are we going to use data then to kind of improve our operations? So we initially started off open just Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in the winter. And we looked at the data on our sales by day. And we found some interesting insights. So if we looked at Friday, this was kind of the trend for Friday sales. And there was a clear peak in the evenings for Friday. Beginning of the day, not so much. And so we actually decided, based on this data, that we would move to being open at 2 p.m. because we're like, it's not really getting us that many sales. 0 is actually 12, just makes it easier to graph if we make it 0. And, we would lose out on some sales, but hopefully some of those people would then come at 2. So there'd be a shifting of the sales from noon and 1 to 2. And we also decided to be staying open a little bit later because we were seeing people running in at the last minute right before we closed. And we realized that everyone wants ice cream after dinner on Friday, so being open later would be helpful. The data looked different for Sunday. So this is the chart showing sales versus time of day for Sunday. And on Sunday, our biggest peak was in the afternoon. So these are people out for a walk on Sunday afternoon, and that was really the hottest time for ice cream. And so that helped us to say, okay, you know what, let's keep the afternoon time open for sure. And we don't necessarily need to be open so much later because actually like it's kind of trending down even at the end of the night for a Sunday night. In terms of how we would use machine learning, the idea here is that machine learning principles will help us to prep and staff correctly. So while we don't have necessarily official machine learning models yet, we are developing them. We do look at things like the weather, which is highly correlated to ice cream sales. Really fun to see in the data. It's ridiculous how correlated it is. And that helps us to know, okay, how many people do we need to staff? How many waffle cones do we need to make in the morning? We think it's going to be this busy based on that data. And also looking at events, which can have a big impact on what's happening, looking at school calendars or people on spring break, things like that. And also being responsive over time. So kind of looking at like, okay, how have sales gone throughout the day? Having someone then check in and say, okay, it looks like we're going to run out of some of these things. Let's make more. And that helps us to be really efficient with how we're utilizing our resources. I will say I would categorize this as an area that could use some development and help because there really aren't a lot of tools out there for small businesses and small restaurants for this kind of forecasting. And so, you know, that's something that I think would be great. And certainly we're using high level stats to inform our decisions, but it could be improved with more development. Okay, so I want to talk about sustainability on some different dimensions that we looked into. So one is the building itself. So one kind of sustainability principle is that we didn't make something new. We reused an existing structure. So that helped us to save on some footprint because, you know, we're kind of utilizing what's already there. Another thing we did is we did everything we could to remove gas usage. So the prior location had a gas hood and we took that out and we have an induction burner for our cooking. We also changed out the heating systems so that we would use heat pumps. And that is another way that we could be more efficient. In addition, we sealed up leaks. So the existing building had lots of air seeping out of it because of various holes and gaps. And so we sealed that up. And when it came to the materials, we looked into reclaimed wood floor and a countertop that was from an elm on Bishop Street. And there's a company that we use that is based in New Haven that takes trees that are from the city and kind of repurposes it for furniture. And we worked with them. So this is bye-bye hood and grease trap, trying to be more sustainable. Energy consumption is obviously a big deal as well. So we did careful calculations of our electrical loads to inform our decisions about purchasing and also even what's on our menu. So for regulation purposes, we have to assume that all of the electricity using things in our store are on at the same time, not a very realistic assumption, and at a 20% buffer. So we were pretty restricted given that we didn't have a huge amount of electrical power in the store. And so that led to decisions like we were not going to have an espresso machine that uses a lot of power. We were going to skip that for now. We also went with a lower powered soft serve machine. The soft serve machines use a lot of electricity because they are literally freezing and making ice cream as you kind of pull the lever down. We also went with less refrigeration to start to see, you know, could we get away with a smaller amount of refrigeration? We got a chest freezer, which is kind of more energy efficient as well. And the result is that we've actually had pretty low energy bills, which has been great. So certainly, you know, we don't have the exact before and after, but, you know, it looks like the bills are reasonable and low. When it comes to sustainability with waste and disposables, this was a big challenge. We wanted to be, as environmentally friendly as we could be with this. We went with a company called World Centric that makes compostable cups and different items. And then we partnered with Peels on Wheels, which is a local composting company, to make sure that that actually gets composted. One of the things that I learned going to different restaurants is that a lot of restaurants will have compostable material, but actually it never gets composted. It just goes in the trash. And so this was something that's really important. We actually have just one waste bin in the store that says compost. So everything is going in the compost, and there is no trash bin available. Obviously, we have trash in the back if you really have something that you need to throw out, and there's one outside. In terms of our suppliers, this was a challenge too when it came to waste. A lot of the ingredients would come in things that were wrapped in plastic or other types of packaging. We did identify a company called BD Provisions, which is a zero waste bulk supplier. So we've used them for some of our toppings. And that's been one way that we've been able to kind of have some sustainability in terms of our waste and disposables. And then finally, there's a nonprofit called Haven's Harvest in New Haven that takes food that might be expiring soon and uses it. And so we've donated to them in the past so that we can try and reduce some of our food waste. I would say the biggest reduction of food waste is probably that we wanted to make everything delicious so everyone ate everything. So that's the other thing. And also not too big of a size. I don't know if you've been to Arethusa, but their small is giant. And I throw that away a lot of the time, even though I love ice cream. So trying to have reasonable sizing. I want to review a few open questions that are more of like invitations for inquiry, something for you all to think about as experts in this field and future leaders in the field. I will say that for commercial equipment purchasing, the guidelines are a little bit less clear than probably for your home purchasing, where maybe you just look at Energy Star, or there are kind of more guidelines around what would be sustainable to purchase. We ended up buying things from Webstaurant, which is basically the Amazon of restaurants, which again, from that like what's feasible perspective, it was really easy to use. However, a lot of the brands I didn't necessarily recognize. The equipment is very different. How do we know what's sustainable, what's not? How is it made? I think that would be something that would be great to have more transparency about. We were really thankful this past fall. ENV 894, which is a green buildings class, actually did a case study for our ice cream store and had some really great insights. So I think that would be stuff that would be great to get out there and be more public. It was definitely more of a black box as a small business owner without a lot of insight and transparency from some of these sources. Another open question is around construction materials. I talked about the reclaimed wood, and that's great, but there were so many materials that went into constructing this building, and there was really no great way to be able to say, okay, are all of these environmentally friendly? Like, where are they from? How are they sourced? It was definitely a challenge. So I think that's another one that felt like a open question, wasn't clear what to do. Another one is zoning and city regulations. So current zoning laws in New Haven make it really difficult to open a food business in a residential neighborhood where people would be walking more. For us to open the ice cream store, we went through probably like a 9-month zoning process in total. It's still ongoing. It was pretty nuts. Part of that was that we had to get alleviations for parking requirements. So the New Haven zoning code says that if you have seats for 4 people, you need 1 parking spot. So if you want to have 20 people, you need to provide 5 parking spots. Well, we were not going to be able to create a parking lot. And also our goal was for it to be walkable. So this regulation is really out of step with having a walkable, livable city in that regard. In terms of city regulations, we had multiple inspections and inspectors that came through asking about things like fire safety, food safety. No one asked, did you reduce your footprint? And no one asked, did you seal up cracks? That was not really a part of that process. And so, that feels like an open area where, ideally that is a part of the process if you're doing renovations and making a new food business. One interesting challenge is around kind of where we source our ingredients in terms of local versus not. We went with a local honey called Swords into Plowshares that has a beehive and eastrock as our understanding. However, this week I saw this Washington Post article that says backyard bees disfigure yards in ways we can only begin to comprehend, and I was very disturbed. And I read the article and it made a lot of sense. Basically, it was saying that there's been such a rise in urban beekeeping, introducing honeybees into this urban setting where they weren't before, displacing local pollinators, the bee gentrifiers. So, we went with this local honey. It's unclear how many urban beekeepers there are in New Haven and whether this is actually an issue in New Haven, but I think it speaks to this point that, we're still learning about the environmental impacts of a lot of things that we do, and it's probably going to be an iterative process. Another question is really around the scope 3 emissions, the emissions that are just really not in our control necessarily. We went with this dairy source that appeared more sustainable in the sense that it had fewer preservatives, but we really don't know much about this farm, right? We don't know what's their manure management. We don't know, do they use antibiotics on their cows? It's not clear. And for many of our ingredients, that's the case where, we look at labels, you do your best, but we know there isn't a lot of enforcement and regulations. So, I think that's a big issue. And ultimately, ideally, it's not up to me as a small business owner or anybody to kind of determine this. There would be more transparency, more regulations around this so that, we don't have to be doing all this research while we're trying to run a business. Okay, so I talked a lot and I wanted to end on some trivia. So please open your phones or laptops or whatever, and you can go to elenasonorange.com/biomes trivia. Maybe, I don't know if I can click on that link. Let's see. Okay, this might be a gap in our plan because I don't think I have the ability to click on the link. All right, well, we can just talk about what the questions are because I do know what they are. Okay, so this is going to be some trivia, and at the end, you'll be asked if you would like to be in a lottery to receive a $10 gift card. You can provide your email, and we'll email you after if you are the selected winner. So I thought it'd be fun to go over some potential open questions. So first question is, which flavor do you think is the most popular at the ice cream shop? And there are three choices: chocolate, vanilla, and the swirl, which is the two of them combined. Then we have, what is our most popular topping? Also, I want to add, this data is from an unknown time period between February and March. We have popular topping, and then we have least popular topping. And the final question is, what is your best guess for this percentage of sales that warm beverages represented in this time period? So I'll give you guys a couple minutes, think it through, make your best guess. All right. Still see some people thinking. Don't think too hard. Just go with your best guess. You're good. All right. All right, let's go over the answers. Hopefully you've had a chance. Click submit if you haven't had a chance yet. Okay, so what do people think was our top flavor? Vanilla, chocolate, or swirl? Swirl, good try. The top flavor was vanilla. People love vanilla. So I guess vanilla is in swirl, but yeah, vanilla by itself is totally the top. It's about like over 40%, 40 to 45%. Swirl's the second, so good job, you were close. And then finally chocolate. And this is actually something that when I've talked to other ice cream store owners is like a very well-documented pattern that vanilla is like 2x the sale of chocolate. So interesting. How about top topping? Rainbow sprinkles, chocolate dip, secret sauce. Okay, I like this, salt. Okay, well, you guys are very close. Chocolate dip is number one, but followed by rainbow sprinkles. So good job, close. And secret sauce is reasonable, but not the top. People are a little more predictable. The tops are like rainbow sprinkles, hot fudge, but the dip is definitely our top. And it is really delicious, so it makes sense. Okay, how about the least favorite topping? Gummy bears, sour cherries, marshmallows, whipped cream. I haven't heard it yet. No one has said it. Sea salt, coffee, it's honey. Yeah. So I guess we don't need to worry about the bees that much. It's fine. It's not being ordered that much. Okay, final question. What percent of sales do you think that warm drinks represented? Keeping in mind that this was the top requested item on the survey. 30, 75, 22%. The answer is 0.5%. So we have a classic case of stated preferences versus revealed preferences. People say they want the warm drinks, but do they order them? No. So very interesting to see that. People are coming for ice cream. All right, so great job, everyone. A lot of good answers here. Quick note that we are hiring for ice cream servers and a general manager. And coming back to social networks, we talked about economic and environmental sustainability, but there's also social sustainability. And so I want to end on a note. I think probably the thing that's been most rewarding about the ice cream store is captured in this little quote from someone who wrote in to us about the day they stumbled across Elena, seeing young children smiling and running across the patio and happy people enjoying ice cream inside. What inspired me was the community and happiness that it fostered. So, we talk about all this data and the numbers, but I think this is really what makes it all special and the special type of sustainability. So, all right. So if this presentation made you hungry, we're open from 2 to 9 p.m. and I'm happy to answer questions in the last 10 minutes. Thank you. All right. Any questions? Yes.
Thank you for this. It's really interesting. I have a question on your packaging that you spoke about. I think it's really cool that you've partnered with Peels on Wheels.
Yeah.
And I have 2 questions. I guess the first one is how you've dealt with telling people what to do with it when they take the ice cream home, because they should probably put it in the trash, which I guess is like an interesting trying to communicate that that's the best thing to do. And then second, whether you've ever considered like using washable, dishes when people eat it in the restaurant.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for people taking it home, I mean, we definitely advertise that the items are compostable with a sign. Unfortunately, New Haven does not have citywide composting. There isn't necessarily universal access to composting. And so I think that's where, again, there's an opportunity. to improve. When it comes to using washables, that's something we did think about. In that case, we would have to probably invest in a dishwasher and use more water. And we felt like, at least for right now, this was a good option to start with, and we could kind of see how it went. I do think one opportunity for us to do even better with our composting is that the volume of the compost is high. And so one thing that we've heard is that if we would have people stack things a little more, that would help to reduce the volume. So I think that's something that we hopefully can invest in so that it's a little bit easier for Peels on Wheels to kind of handle the composting and the volume. But yeah, that would be a great kind of calculation to do in terms of like how much water we would use from washing and yeah.
Hey there. Have you looked at all into having cows that are fed with seaweed?
Cows fed with seaweed. So actually, I did see that there was like a neutral milk company that like exists in the world. I just saw this on Instagram and I clicked on the link and they were like, we're carbon neutral. But then I looked and they were just purchasing carbon offsets. So it wasn't seaweed. I mean, we definitely could reach out to this farm and ask them. It would be interesting to see if they were open to it. I have not seen that advertised anywhere as like a aspect of a given soft serve milk product, but
they
I think
say
it would be a conversation to have with them.
With certain kinds of seaweed, it reduces the emissions
right.
from the cows a ton. I just don't know what it does to the flavor of the milk.
Yeah, I don't know how it would impact the flavor. That's a good question. Unclear. To be tested. We have one back there. A couple more here.
Thank you so much for your talk and for bringing data science to YSE. I'm curious to know if there's other businesses maybe that you've learned from or worked with in New Haven that have been through similar sustainability processes in terms of assessing their sustainability, trying to build a sustainable business from in the first place. And then sort of as a second part, do you feel like the process you've been through is something that will help inform other businesses going forward? Like, are you thinking about sort of sharing these insights with other food businesses in New Haven?
Great question. A lot of the talk and conversation I've had with other food business owners has been more around the business sustainability rather than the environmental sustainability. And I think for most of the business owners that I've talked to, that really is top of mind. And I have heard from other business owners, again, that they will use compostable materials. And that seems like a pretty common step. But then again, a lot of times that will end up in the trash for many businesses. So I think that's a conversation that would be great to have more of and to share more learnings. Claire's is a kind of a long-term New Haven business that has invested in sustainability. So I think that's one New Haven example that comes to mind. But I would say by and large, it does not appear to be top of mind for many business owners. Yeah. Or small restaurants. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Given how fast-paced the restaurant industry is, and it's like very hype driven, I'm curious how you use data to kind of deal with both like rare but disproportionately positive and negative kind of events that can occur. So something might be a windfall event for your case, but also potentially something like COVID, which can be a real disruptor.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of windfalls, I think one thing that we saw was last week when the temperature went to 85 degrees, we were like, oh my God, we're slammed. Like, we're so packed. And as you saw in the data, vanilla is the top seller. So the vanilla side of our machine started to like really struggle. Like, it was like making weird noises. We were like, what's happening? We've never seen this before. And so that was something that we were like, okay, we need to really make a plan to kind of adapt if we get this busy. How do we make sure we're ready for that and that our kind of machinery is ready? As I mentioned, we went with kind of a lower powered soft serve machine with the thought that that would be easier to maintain, but that also means that the throughput is not as high. And so, how do we kind of navigate that? Ice cream is super seasonal. So, definitely there's a big curve in terms of summer versus winter. So there's kind of a built-in every year change of product, change of both windfall and negative built into ice cream. For COVID, I mean, the biggest thing that I've seen for that is that people offer takeaway. And that was something that we actually did start offering this winter because we realized that a lot of people did want ice cream, but they wanted to eat it sitting on their couch watching television. And so we started selling ice cream sandwiches and pints, and that was actually a really good boost to our sales. And I think for something like COVID, that would be another option. We also have a service window, which I actually thought of in terms of COVID, because I was like, okay, people can order their ice cream from the outside as opposed to having to come inside, which is like a nice option for people. Yeah, awesome. All right, next question.
Thank you very much for your talk. I'm curious, what project management software and analytic technologies did you use to manage your business, analytics, and all the field tests?
Okay, so we use Toast, which is a payment processing platform. They also do offer, an Excel spreadsheet you can download of your sales data, which is great, and some aggregation and displays and visualizations, which is helpful. So that's the primary source for sales data that we use. And for other types of data, such as the taste testing, kind of crowdsourcing, mostly Google products, so Google Forms and spreadsheets and Google Sheets have been the main tools that we've used. I do have multiple Python notebooks with analysis of our data. So we are using Python just as people will learn in real world environmental data science. However, as I mentioned, a lot of, I think, larger chains have access to many more tools that they've built in and have vendors providing. And I think for a lot of kind of, one-off mom and pop shops, there aren't a lot of tools that exist. So a lot of these point of sales like Toast are focused on providing those. So I know that they are expanding some of their offerings. They have an inventory management software that we're looking into and, trying to kind of provide more tools for restaurants of all sizes. But definitely we found we have been supplementing with kind of calculations on our back end ourselves, which I can do because I have that skill set, but probably not a lot of small businesses do. So I think that's definitely an opportunity.
All right. Due to time limit, if you have further questions, feel free to stick around. But thanks so much, everyone, for coming.
Thank you guys for having me.
Elena. Great talk.